Williams. But Zhou Guanyu just missing out on the points again, Lewis, in 11th. But conversely, I suppose, who was trying trying the long game, I suppose, was Aston Martin with Lance Stroll. I think they came in early under the first safety car, didn't they, for a cheeky pit stop to get rid of the alternate tyre, then came straight back in again. So they'd done their mandatory stop, thinking they might be able to go to the end. But Aston Martin, I mean, it was the best they could try and pull out from what has been a disastrous weekend. And now, thanks to that point from Williams, they're last in the constructors.
Yeah, as you say, just a complete disaster of a weekend for Aston Martin and Sebastian as well on his return after missing the first two races with COVID. He comes back and has the worst possible weekend you could imagine. Again, not all of his doing, but it just all went wrong from the start. On Friday, there were issues. Vettel missed most of Friday's running, had the engine problem, missed the second session result, obviously crashed in final practice, which put the team on the back foot going into qualifying. And they did a miraculous job to fix his car in time, helped out a bit by the red flag, so that he could at least complete one flying lap in qualifying. But obviously with the competitiveness of the Aston Martin at the moment, it just wasn't enough to even come close to getting out of Q1. So yeah, they find themselves in a really, really tricky spot at the moment. Just the car is just so slow at the moment. They can't seem to get any sort of performance out of it. And it looks a real handful to drive. I mean, we saw both drivers crashing in practice. Seb obviously went off before he eventually crashed out of the race. He had an off at turn 11, and the car just didn't look like it wanted to turn into the corner. And then he obviously lost control, I think, coming out of turn 4, wasn't it, where he slammed into the wall on the opposite side. But yeah, it's a really sort of nightmare start to the season for Aston Martin. This was meant to be the start of a bright new era for the team, and it's just all gone completely wrong so far. And they thought, we thought that last season was bad for Aston Martin, and so far this season's been pretty terrible. But Mike Crack said yesterday that they don't think there's a fundamental sort of concept issue with the car. They do believe there is potential in it, there is performance defined. It's just getting on top of that and extracting the performance. That's the issue so far. So if they can work that all out, then maybe we'll see their fortunes improve. The good news, I suppose, is that they don't think it is a fundamental issue with the design of the car. That's possibly the only positive to sort of take away from the weekend. But yeah, and then just compounding the weekend really was Lance Stroll getting a penalty point for weaving on the straight in his defence against Valtteri. Just sort of summed up the weekend as a whole and finished 12th. So yeah, it was just a really, really bad weekend and a really bad start to the season.
Harry, you asked me last week whether I thought Vettel would, be okay getting in, having missed first couple of races, and I thought he would, and I was wrong again, I feel, because he didn't really look that sharp, and whether that's because he missed those first two races, maybe the effects of COVID. I think you're right, though, as well, Lewis, it's about the car, and clearly it's a really difficult car to drive, so it's a mixture of, is Seb right back on top of his game, but he's in a car that clearly it's very nervous and not a happy one to drive. But I was disappointed in how it all went, and I thought both drivers, they both could have done better than they did. Lance having that silly shunt with Latifi as well, which was all a bit unnecessary in practice. So yeah, it was a horrible weekend for them.
I think I made this point perhaps on the last podcast. I certainly made it over the weekend as well. That team, in whatever guise, the Silverstone-based team, whether it's been Force India or Racing Point or go back to Jordan, Midland, Spiker, they've always had such tiny budget and they've always managed to be the team and garnered this reputation for, making the best out of what they had and outperforming those with bigger budgets around them. Now, Ben, they've got the Aston Martin brand involved. They've got this new state-of-the-art facility. They've got the funding. What's the excuse?
It's a tricky one. And what is also tricky is the engineering side is all changing at the moment because Dan Fallows is coming in, who was head of aero at Red Bull. But April, where we are now, is basically where he is officially becoming that role, because all these teams, they don't allow their top people to switch immediately. They've got Luca Fabato in there as well. He joined at the beginning of this year, and he worked with Sauber. So you've got this engineering team that basically have put this car together, but now you've got almost another engineering team coming in to make it better or look ahead to the future. So it is a bit more disruptive, I think, that whole technical side at Aston Martin, and that does make life complicated. But they do have great people, as you say, because Andrew Green, who's been in charge of the design for many years, come up with some great cars. Tom McCullough, the performance director, fantastic. I've known him over the years, and he really is so sharp. I'm sure he would have probably been one of the ones who went for that strategy. Well, actually, their strategy people are really very, very good as well. So. Yeah, I don't know quite what's going on for them. I did think it was a bit ironic as well that Max Verstappen was also complaining about an Aston Martin safety car over the weekend. So Aston Martin didn't just have grief with their Formula One car, and Max was complaining the Aston Martin safety car wasn't fast enough.
And then Charles Leclerc chimes in with, well, maybe we should have a Ferrari safety car. That might be quicker. Lewis, it is certainly a disaster for Sebastian Vettel and Aston Martin. Questions naturally, I suppose, being raised about Sebastian Vettel. We spoke about it last week. Has he still got the hunger, the fight? Certainly coming into this weekend, I think Nico Hulkenberg, who's replaced him, got a 17th and a 12th in his first two race periods. I think Aston Martin would have been pretty happy with just to sort of get those positions again. And Vettel, I mean, he's not going to want to stick around driving at the back like this, is he?
It's hard to see it. It really is. A full-time world champion, a guy who's used to being at the front of the grid. That's where he wants to be. That's where he should be. If the season continues in this way, it is difficult to imagine him deciding to carry on. Because, almost what is the point for him? He's at that sort of stage. He is coming towards the end of his career naturally, and it just doesn't look like anything's going to happen soon. I mean, Aston Martin are in a sort of a transitionary period, as Ben touched on, with the engineering changes and the new factory that's coming. This was never going to be a quick route to success. This was always going to take a few years, and I think obviously Seb has joined the team at the start of this sort of new era. And was he ever going to sort of be there by the point that the team got to winning ways? I'm not so sure.
Is it a bit like when Michael Schumacher joined Mercedes?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, it just looked like he was it's almost sort of the wrong time for Seb in terms of being in a position to fight for wins and world titles again. Obviously, with the new rules coming in, there was a hope that might have had a dramatic change suddenly, and Aston Martin could have found themselves towards the front of the grid. But realistically, it's always been a 4 to 5 year plan to get to that situation. So really, considering that, would Seb be around in 4 or 5 years? Probably not. But yeah, I think his future is going to be sort of one of the key things over the next few months. And the way it's going at the moment, I personally can't see him wanting to continue, and I wouldn't blame him. But it's going to be interesting to see who could end up at Aston Martin, because there is real promise of that team, and if they can put everything together and be on course to be in a position to eventually fight for world titles, they need a really strong driver lineup. So who's going to be the guy who replaces Seb? It's interesting. I was thinking recently, could it be somebody like Pierre Gasly, who is potentially looking for, if he doesn't end up getting the Red Bull drive next season, which, going so far on how Sergio Perez has been performing, there's no reason for Red Bull to change anything there. But early days obviously in the season, but as it stands, Max and Checo seem to be doing great at Red Bull, so why not keep that going? But Pierre's contract comes to an end at the end of this season, and if he can't get that Red Bull drive, is he really going to want to stick around in AlphaTauri for another couple of years fighting in midfield? He really wants to be at the front of the grid proving himself. He's already won a race. He knows what he can do, and he wants that second chance to win races. And maybe joining a project like Aston Martin could be something that appeals to him. Might take a few years, but he's got time on his side, and perhaps that that could be one option that that Aston Martin have if Seb does decide to leave at the end of the season.
Well, that already thinking about who's going to replace Sebastian Vettel, it seems like a crime to be suggesting that just in it. 3 races in. But at the end of it all, currently as it stands, it's Charles Leclerc who tops the standings, 2 wins and a second place, 71 points. George Russell, quite a way back now, 37 points in second. And Carlos Sainz Jr., despite retiring, holds on to third place in the Constructors, just in front of Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton, the top 5. Reigning champion Max Verstappen down in 6th. Before we log off for another week, Jen's going to put you on the spot. Ben, your biggest takeaway from the weekend?
My biggest takeaway was chicken and chips, actually.
Oh, delightful.
Yeah. It was good. I think part of it was seeing Williams get that point, because I think starting right at the back as they did, and the chances of them actually making that work were so remote, but they stuck with it. And fair play to Alex Albon. He stayed in front of Esteban Ocon. Ocon in the Alpine couldn't find a way past him. We never really saw much of it, but they were close for a long time. I was impressed that Ocon, impressed by Albon. I have to say that he wasn't passed by Ocon, and in the end, it scored him a point. So fair play to Albon and Williams for getting that point.
And Lewis, same for you.
I'd have to say the performance of Ferrari. I think just how strong and dominant they were, and they really are in a strong position now. We've kind of seen the proof 3 races in that they can compete everywhere for race wins, and I think they're in complete control at the moment. So yeah, I think Ferrari's performance, I'd say.
I'm going to go for a really rogue one. I'm going to say Mick Schumacher finishing ahead of Kevin Magnussen for the first time. I don't felt like a bit of an off weekend for Haas in general, and a slightly off weekend for Magnussen too. But either way, I think that's a confidence boost that Mick Schumacher would have needed just to be able to stay in front of K-Mag this time around. So that was my big takeaway. I did the standings obviously for the Drivers' Championship. I will also do the all-important standings for our own championship because, as Ben alluded to,
I'll have dropped to near zero on that one.
You know what? We all went drastically different just to try and see if we could, get some points on the board, because we're all level. But I tell you what, we're still level because we all got at least one.
Really?
Because, well, you get a point for Perez. So, Ben, you went Sainz, Perez, Hamilton. So you get the point for Perez.
Oh.
Lewis, you went Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton. So you get the point for Leclerc. And I went Perez, Verstappen, Sainz. So I get the point for Perez. So we all get 1 extra point. So we really got to go. I'm going to go for an Aston Martin podium, I think, next time around. That's the only way we can get some sort of differentiation. But make sure if you're getting involved as well, you let us know what your predictions were and where you were in the standings in the comments below. A weekend off, and then we are back in Europe for Imola as well, which will be exciting. So we will be back to preview that. But in the meantime, make sure you're tuned in across crash.net for all the latest news and analysis across these next couple of weeks. And then we'll be back with you, of course, next week to preview all things Imola. Get your questions in, leave them in the comments section, or tweet, Instagram, or Facebook us. Just search Crash F1. Please do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, we'll see you right back here next week. But from myself, Lewis Larkham, and Ben Edwards, bye-bye.